completed. Next, there's a lockdown drill happening tomorrow. A lockdown drill helps us practice what to do in case of a dangerous intruder. So what happens is when you hear the lockdown message over the PA, move quickly to the closest room that can close and lock and has blinds. Turn off all lights and close the blinds. Then go to the least visible corner of the room and stay completely quiet. We'll practice it tomorrow. Those are the basics, and also if you have any questions, you can ask any of your instructors. Thanks to all of the students who signed up for Krav Maga. This is a reminder that the first class is after school today at 4 to 5:30 p.m. Please meet in room 320. And last but not least, to all students who signed up for the hike this Saturday on Bowen Island, this is a reminder that we have a mandatory trip meeting on Friday after school. Please meet in room 314 at 4 p.m. We will go over all the details of the hike and all expectations. And as a reminder, if you don't attend this meeting, you cannot come to the hike. So please mark it in your calendar and don't forget to come. That's it for today. Thank you everyone for your attention. Have a great day.
Thank you, Zerlinda. All right, ready, people? Andre, that was a very authoritative nod. You were like, all right, ready? Okay, here we go. All right, good morning. Officially, welcome to, what day is today? Wednesday? Welcome to Wednesday. Unadi is here, so good morning to you. Good evening, I guess, more likely. And let's jump in. So yesterday we were talking about, we were talking about Winston Churchill's never, 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 never speech, right? It's probably a few less nevers. And we wanted to look at this primary source because that's part of what historians do, right? They try to take materials from the past and explain them, right? Use them to create a narrative and not only explain what happened, but explain what the significance of those things were and why they were important and what they caused to happen and what caused them to happen, right? So we looked at this primary source knowing that, of course, primary sources aren't always 100% truthful or factual, right? So it might be tempting to believe everything we see from the past because, well, they were there, right? Those people were there. But again, people in the past don't know everything about everything, right? They're not clairvoyant. They always write for a purpose. They always write for an audience. They may purposely be trying to mislead someone, right? And so think of all the fake news that's circulating around right now. Those will all be primary sources for historians in 100 years, right? And historians in 100 years in the future will look back and have to say, well, yeah, we have this primary source, but it was fake news, right? It's all false, right? So we looked at this source and I asked you a couple of questions about who was the audience for this speech? Sure, soldiers definitely would have been listening, I'm sure, right, to their commander-in-chief, as it were. The young men in the...
Was it a school?
It was, yeah. So it was a school for young men. I think it might have been a boarding school, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. And yeah, Winston Churchill's giving this speech to all of these young men at the school. But again, who else is listening? Yeah, so Churchill knows that he's addressing these young men, but he's also addressing the nation. And he's addressing the nation at a particular time in the history of World War II. And based on his speech, kind of what was the situation in World War II? How were things going? Bad? How so?
Remember, I think like the UK was getting attacked at the time, right? It's like the bombings or something.
Well, I think this would have been shortly thereafter, right?
Yeah.
Because he mentions that in the speech. He says that, we were, the unbearable might of the enemy was raining down on us or something like that. So Yeah, so this is after the Battle of Britain, right? What else is the situation in the war in terms of how things are going?
America joined the World War II.
Right, America had just joined, right? So okay, there's a lot of other things going on here, so I'm just going to wait for Ben to get ready there and for Jim and Michelle to tune back in here. Are you listening? Yeah? Okay. So Yoya says, yeah, the U.S. had just joined the war, right? And Churchill mentions that. He said we were alone last year, right? Very alone. And now we're not alone anymore, right? We've got an ally, an important ally. What else is kind of the state of the war at this point? I don't know if he mentions this, but I mentioned it yesterday. And I think, let me just see if I have my map. I don't have my map. So in the map, keep in mind that, you know, the Nazis had been winning victory after victory at this point, right? So even though Britain is better armed, even though they have survived the Blitz, right, the bombing, the Battle of Britain, even though they now have a big powerful ally in the United States, even though all of those things are good, they're not really on a winning streak yet, right? Hitler is the one he's been having success after success for the most part. And so, you know, we haven't hit the turning point yet, right? It's still the Nazis' war. What's that?
Nazis reign of terror.
Yeah, it's kind of it's still yeah, they're in the driver's seat still, right? So even though things are better for Britain than they were a year ago, they're definitely not. Things are still not that great, right? The outcome of the war is not certain at this time. What were some of the things he was trying to communicate to people? Either what was he trying to tell them, or what was he trying to get them to feel? What's that? Ease? So he wanted people to feel like at ease or calm? Is that what you mean? What? To give props?
Keep calm.
Oh, keep calm. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, he wanted people to be calm, right? And again, we contrasted Churchill's speaking style to Hitler, right? Hitler is like, rah, 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 you know, he's like yelling at people. And Winston Churchill's like, yes, we were alone before, but we're not so very alone now, you know. And again, there's a bit of, you know, the British are pretty understated and they don't like to make a fuss about anything. But yeah, his whole speech is, you know, we were alone before, but we're not so alone now. And we were poorly armed, but now we are not so poorly armed. And it's a very kind of calming tone, right? He wants people to relax, right? And yeah, things are better than they were. What else is he trying to get people to think or to feel? Yeah, and what does he say to try to convince people of that?
Bringing up the U.S. Join the war, gives the people more confidence.
Yeah.
More reassurance.
Sure. So he kind of reassures people that, you know, we have an ally now, we have help. How else does he kind of reassure people that that they will triumph? What does he say? We have to be equally good at what is sharp and short as to what is long and difficult, right? But once the British kind of make up their mind that a job should be done,
through and finish.
Yeah. They'll
No matter how long it takes, they still get the job done.
they'll see it through, right? They will, no matter how long it takes, they will get the job done. And again, he's speaking to the feeling of the nation here because, again, the British emerge from the Battle of Britain not surrendering as Hitler wanted them to do, but they're like, okay, we're gonna win this now, right? You want to bomb our country, you're going down, right? So again, the mood of the British public shifts, right, from one of, oh, let's not, let's have peace, let's not have war, to okay, it's on, right? And Churchill is acknowledging that, right? He's saying, yeah, well, it may take a long time, but we will.
It just reminds them, like, we've been through troubles before, we can do it again.
Yeah, right. We only need to persevere to conquer, right?
Yeah.
We just have to keep going, and we will.
Our big brother will do everything for us.
Well, not everything. I mean, Canada did some too. Anything else he's trying to communicate here? Churchill, kind of reassurance. A little bit of a calming message.
Try not to give up.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of the perseverance thing, right? Never give up, never give in, never, 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 right? And I don't know, I think that's a pretty strong statement for a politician, but then Churchill made a lot of strong statements. But yeah, never give in to force or to the overwhelming might of the enemy, right? Doesn't matter how powerful your adversary is, never give up, right? And so he's kind of, he's talking to these young people. I guess he's trying to give them some, advice, but he's also calming the nation, and he's also preparing them as well, right? Because again, this is 1941. The war is not going to end for 4 more years, right? Think of where you were 4 years ago. You're all, yeah, but just think about how long ago that was. Is that not a long time? That's a long time, right? And so Churchill is saying, hey, things are okay. We've got we made it through. We've got an ally. We're armed, but it's going to be a long haul, right? But he's saying, but we're not going to give up. We're not going to give in, right? And so, yeah, there's a little bit of reassurance. There's a little bit of calming. There's a little bit of maybe British pride stirred in there, right? But there's also this message that this will not be over soon, right? This will be a long haul. But what does he say at the very end? The last thing. Yeah. So these are serious times, right? These are times in which, there are struggles, right? There's challenges. But what does he say about that?
One thing for them is happy, more good days that we country has.
Yeah.
I guess it shows the perseverance and stuff that we used to.
Yeah. So they.
Think of it in a bad way.
Yeah, they're serious issues, right? These are serious things that Britain is confronting, but this is an opportunity, right? This is, heroes can't be great unless there is some sort of great challenge for them to overcome, right? The Avengers are great because they basically saved the entire universe, right? Thanos was a big challenge, literally and figuratively. He was a big challenge, right? And so they become more heroic as they overcome something massive, right? Something huge. And so Churchill's kind of saying the same thing, right? This is a big challenge, right? This is the fight of our lives kind of thing, which I think Captain America says in one of the movies too. But this is the fight of our lives, but that's what allows people to be heroic, right? And he says that everybody can, right? Regardless of their station, right? Regardless of where they are in British society, everybody can contribute. Everyone can be great, right? That's kind of a nice note to end on, I think, right? For him, anyway. Do you, and the last thing I think I asked you yesterday was, do you think he felt this way? Like for real? I kind of feel, it feels authentic to me. It's definitely the kind of thing that a leader should say, right? To a population. But I don't know. I feel like there's a certain authenticity to his words here. And maybe he did believe this.
I hope he did.
Well, they didn't give up, did they? They did not, right? And they did conquer, did they not? Yes, they did. So either whether he believed it or not, they did what he said they were going to do. Any last kind of observations or things you want to say about Churchill or Never, Never, Never? No?
I think we pretty much covered everything about it.
I think so. There's a lot in there though, right? Yeah, if you dig a little bit, there's some interesting things. Okay. What's next? Oh, yes. So I'm going to ask you to read a little section of the text here, and part of what we will uncover in this text or in this part of the text, and actually let me just open it up here because I just need to remind myself what's there. Good morning. Right.
I don't think it's included.
Okay, I'm gonna pop it in there right now. Oh yeah, so this section of the text will talk a little bit about Pearl Harbor, the Battle of the Atlantic, and then we'll get to the Holocaust. And so I think everyone is probably aware of what the Holocaust is. What is the Holocaust?
Genocide.
Of?
Jews.
Yeah, right. It's the name we give to the genocide of the Jewish people, right? And there's kind of an interesting. We'll have some things to talk about with regard to the Holocaust, with regard to genocide more generally, and there's actually something happening this afternoon that we will kind of participate in, which strangely enough is connected to that idea of genocide, but we'll get to that in the second half. So what I would like to ask you to do then is to, that should be in Microsoft Teams now, yes it is start reading this section and answer just the 2 questions on page 138, and then we'll talk again about the Holocaust, a little bit about genocide, and then we have another thing to do in the second half, okay, for a little bit. So I'll let you start reading, and then we can talk. It says here that this is on page 123. It says the attack on Pearl Harbor ignited war fever in the United States. Safe behind ocean barriers, the U.S. had let its military forces atrophy. What does atrophy mean?
It doesn't work the same anymore. I don't know how to explain it, but the closest example is muscle atrophy.
Yeah. Yeah, muscles can atrophy if they're not used, right? So they kind of shrink up, or they shrivel up, or they lose lose their ability to be useful. Yeah, that's what that means. But you're right, we usually use it in that muscle context. I'm just going to turn down my volume here. There we go. Bless you. So whereabouts are you? Halfway, 3/4 of the way, all the way, most of the way? Okay. Oops. Okay, so let's talk. This section opens with just a little bit of the Pacific War, right? So the little piece of information that Japan is going to attack the United States at Pearl Harbor, that's going to bring the U.S. into the war finally, right? What's this whole Battle of the Atlantic thing about? It's what? It's what?
Whoever wins it will likely win the war.
Yeah, that's what. That was another thing that Churchill said, right? The most important battle of the war is the Battle of the Atlantic, and to lose that is to lose the entire war. And what is this Battle of the Atlantic? Is it one battle?
The main thing before the war.
Well, it's during the war, right? And what's it about?
It's the transportation of the weapons and stuff. And Germany was trying to stop it. America and Britain were trying to find the safest way to do it.
Yeah, because Britain is an island, right? If you don't bring it there, you won't find it there, right? So everything has to be shipped into Britain, right? But of course, the Nazis know this, and they are patrolling the Atlantic, trying to sink all of these supply ships, right? Because, again, if Britain gets cut off from its supply line, what did they say in the text? That they had about 2 months of supplies? Yeah, if you can cut the supply line, Britain's out in 2 months, right? And so the Nazis are working very hard to cut off that supply line, right? But of course, the Allies are working very hard to make sure those ships get across. What kind of strategies are they using? What kind of strategies are they using? Or just what are they doing to try to be successful?
Different routes.
Different routes, okay.
There's one through Iran.
Right? Right, so they're shipping things.
They had like extra patrol around the convoys, the air and the sea.
Yeah. So these merchant ships that are full of food or grain or weapons or whatever it is, they're all escorted by submarines, right, and by battleships that are meant to defend them. They've got aircraft carriers, right, with air support flying over, making sure nobody goes anywhere near these ships.
Anti-submarine technology as well.
Right, anti-submarine technology, right, torpedoes and things. From the text, the Allies do a pretty effective job of taking care of those German submarines, do they not?
Yeah.
What did they say? There was like 11 or 1,200 of them, and by the end of the war, they'd sunk about 1,100 or something. Yeah, that's a pretty good. That's a pretty good scorecard, right? So they basically clear the Atlantic Ocean of these German submarines, right? But this is an important thing, right? And again, we talked about this when we talked about the Russian or the Nazis moving into Russia. Supply is important, right? It's boring, right? The sexier part is all the battle plans and, storming the gates or whatever it is. That's all very exciting, but if you can't supply your army, you're not going to win, right? And Churchill knew that, but the Nazis knew it as well. Question 11 has to do with, actually it doesn't have to do with the Holocaust, but let me ask about it. So that section of the text is pretty shocking, right? Even if you have heard of the Holocaust before, I have a hard time Yeah.
There are really good documentaries on it on Netflix.
They're hard to watch though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you have the stomach for it, it's really
Yeah, it's
informative.
yeah, the sheer it's informative, but like the sheer brutality of it is just difficult to
Understand.
it's difficult to understand, right? Like what was the one statistic in Ukraine where the Jewish population went from 800,000 to 100,000 in the space of like a month?
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Like that's the population of Vancouver, right? Not Burnaby and everything else, but like the Vancouver part of Vancouver, that's the population, that's everybody.
Wait, what is the Vancouver part of Vancouver?
That is everything, you know where Boundary Road is? Yeah, so everything west of Boundary Road, everything up to the edge of the inlet, so across is North Vancouver, so that doesn't count. And then everything down to where you cross the bridge to go to the airport, that's all Vancouver. Yeah, Vancouver. And then you got other cities. But I think Vancouver has about maybe 700,000 people in it. So yeah, that's everybody, right? And that's only in Ukraine. And that's only in 1 month, right? And you can see the numbers are huge, right? Thousands and thousands of people are rounded up and executed, right? Men, women, children, everybody, right? And it's difficult to, yeah, like for me, it's difficult to imagine how something like that can happen, right? Especially when, you know, I can imagine Adolf Hitler being, you know, an evil person. That's easy enough to imagine, but how everyone cooperates with him and and perpetrates this, I don't get that, right? That's difficult for me to imagine. We'll talk a little bit more about genocide shortly, and actually maybe I'll talk about it right now. So most people either don't know about this or don't like to use this term or just don't really like to talk about it, period. But there are many who would argue that there has been a genocide that's happened and maybe still is happening within Canada. And that's that has to do with the experience of Canada's Indigenous people. I don't know what you know about the history here, but to make a 300 or 400 year story very short, basically what's happened is that, you know, Europeans came to this continent and pushed aside Indigenous people to make the country that you see around us. And so there were a lot of ways in which the Canadian government tried to destroy Indigenous culture and arguably destroy Indigenous people, right? Indigenous people were in the way. The way Europeans like to kind of think about Canada and the US was this great untouched open land, right? There for the taking. But of course it wasn't there for the taking because there were people who had been living here for thousands of years, right? This was their home. And they, you know, I think we've created a pretty good country here in Canada, but it has been at the expense of Indigenous people. It was taken from them so that we could build this. That theft and destruction has not been adequately addressed as of yet. So Indigenous people in Canada still suffer discrimination and unequal social outcomes. Anywhere you want to look in terms of health outcomes or education or earnings or however you want to try to measure the quality of life of Indigenous people, they are significantly below the rest of Canada. And again, they have that experience because they have been pushed aside, right, by the rest of Canada. The Canadian government has, over the years, passed a number of laws and policies that have limited Indigenous people's rights and ability to participate in Canadian society or even to practice their traditional way of life. One of the ways in which they did this, which you may have heard of or maybe not, are Indian residential schools. Have you heard of them? What do you know about them? Yeah. Right. How much it's? Oh, yeah. Well, the first Indian residential school. Okay, well, let me just take a step back. So, Indian residential schools were, on the surface, created to provide an education to indigenous kids, and it was something that indigenous people wanted. So they had asked the government to help educate their kids because Canada was becoming a country, things were changing, and they knew that their kids would need an education. But what they got was less an education and more of the schools were more a tool of assimilation. So the kids were taken to these schools, they were boarding schools, hundreds of kilometers away from their homes, and they were basically punished for doing anything that had to do with their traditional culture. So speaking their original language, anything at all. And many of these kids were brutalized. So physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, you name it, these kids were subjected to it. And many, many kids died at these schools. The estimates are currently around 6,000. And again, the first Indian residential school, I think, opened in maybe the late 1800s, let's say 1875. The last one closed, believe it or not, in 1996. So these schools were in operation for roughly 100 years, give or take. And like generations of indigenous people were subjected to these schools, right? And so, think about the massive trauma that a population goes through when like generations of kids are going through a school that emotionally and physically and sexually abuses them, right? And so the Indian residential schools are something that people don't want to talk about because A, it's horrible, and B, it's not really kind of the thing you think about when you think of Canada, right? Because we're kind of a good country, right? We're a nice country. We're very accepting of multiculturalism and things like that, right? And so this is a pretty dark chapter of Canadian history, but it's also a chapter that is not over yet, which is the problem, is that yes, this happened in the past, but there are present effects that are still being felt, right? There's like a ripple through time. And so again, as you may have seen in the news, last week, I think it was, they did some ground penetrating radar, right? They did some remote sensing outside of the school, and they seem to have found the graves of 215 children, right, from this school that had died at this school. And again, the graves were unmarked, right? So nobody knew they were there. Nobody knew what happened to these kids, and in many cases that's one of the issues, is that kids went to this school and then they were never heard from again, right? Their parents might have received a letter that they died, or they might not have, but they just vanished, right? And that's why we think about 6,000 may have died, but we have no idea because they didn't document things very well because they didn't give a shit, really, is what it was. And so, yeah, we've made this kind of shocking and uncomfortable discovery last week, and now people are still kind of reacting to it, right? Indigenous communities, but also Canadians as well. And there's a lot of thinking and talking and work to be done to overcome this, right? And to sort of find some sort of useful closure, right? And again, it would be different if everything was fine now, right? If if Indigenous people and non-Indigenous Canadians, if everything was cool, and then we found this, that would be one thing, right? But we're not cool, right? There's still a pretty massive inequality. There are still barriers that Indigenous communities have, and now we find this too, right? So it's not, it's a historical thing, but it's also connected to something that's happening right now. And so what we'll do, I know we're kind of going into our break here, but I think that's going to be okay. I'll make it up to you. What we're going to do is we're going to tune into a live stream that is it's kind of a public event that's being held. Well, here, I'll read this. So what they're having is an open public event. Vancouver School Board is running it, dedicated to the 215 children and families of these Indigenous people who are.
Was that the thing going downtown?
Say again?
They're doing something downtown where they put a tree and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what the shoes are for. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, people are kind of, people are marking this. So we're gonna tune in about 10 minutes or so, and what we'll see here is it's gonna take 20 minutes. Okay, so there'll be some opening remarks, okay, from the Indigenous Education Department. So we'll hear some opening remarks. There'll be 2 minutes and 15 seconds of silence for obvious reasons. There'll be some songs that are sung by Indigenous people, and there'll be sort of, I think, traditional songs that you would sing when someone died or when you lost part of your community. Then there'll be some closing remarks, and then there'll be a slideshow. So I'm not really sure how that's going to go, but maybe what we'll do is I'll put this up on the screen here. Hang on a sec. I'll put it into Microsoft Teams for our online people, and so if you want to tune into it, you can do so there. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to live stream their live stream. So well, I don't know. Should I?
You can. You just have to delete the video after.
Oh, I don't want to delete it after. Okay, so I won't live stream their live stream, but for online people, you can watch it on your own. So maybe we'll do that. So what I'll do here is just let me.
Do you monetize the video? If you don't, you can just stream it and you'll be fine.
I don't monetize them, but I have streamed copyrighted content before and had my video taken down. So I don't want to get in trouble. I assumed nobody would notice if I showed a quick 3-minute video that I took from somewhere, but I was wrong. They did notice. So
I'll do it then.
yeah. And they caught on quick too. They caught on within 24 hours. They knew.
I got an email from 5 minutes after I finished my stream. They muted my whole 2 hours.
Did they?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Without playing music in there.
Oh, yeah. They're particular about that, eh?
Yeah.
So this is what we'll do. So maybe we'll just take a quick chill out break. But this, as you can see, this is going to start in 6 minutes, okay? So just be ready for that. If you're going to leave the room, be back in 5 so that we can participate in this, okay? And so same thing with you online people. Take 5, and then this will start very shortly, okay? Let me just make sure my sound is in the right place.
So we have a 5 minute break.
5 minutes.
Sorry for being late, I had an appointment emergency. That's
that's-
why I wasn't able.
That's okay. Oh, where's the volume? Why is there no volume, guys? No? Okay. There's no voice? Oh. Oh. Maybe he's muted? Oh, there. Oh. There we go.
Tumble, sacred Musqueam territory. I want to welcome you here on behalf of your host, the Vancouver School Board. We are here to share with you truthful words and very important words. So I welcome you all to this moment in time. Thank you for joining us. In the prayer, the first half, I'm asking the infinite and our collective ancestors, asking them to please lift the spirits of the 215 spirits that were at Kamloopa, to lift them up so that they're free. Help them to be free. Know that they're free now. The second part, I'm also asking the Infinite and our collective ancestors to please open all of our hearts and minds to the truth of the words that you're going to hear, and the truth of Canada's history towards my friends and relatives across what's called Canada. Canada is an Iroquois word for village. We all belong to the same village, so we all need to know the same truth. Nutsamot, Coast Salish language, means we are one. We are one. Thank you very much. Take care, and please hear the words that are going to be spoken today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tantle, hello. My name is David DeLorme. I am the District Vice Principal of Indigenous Education for the
Some technical issues, I suppose. This live streaming isn't as easy as it looks, you know.
When one window doesn't work and everything just doesn't work.
Good day. My name is Chaz Desjardins. My traditional name is Kamanisu Pisuwat, which translates from the Hiawiwan into English as Helper Other Thunderbirds. I'm the daughter of Robert Hubin Desjardins, Nahel Métis, and the daughter of Diane Laring Johnson, whose ancestry is English, French, and Spanish. I'm a member to the Cold Lake First Nations, and I'm in Treaty 6 Iskway. I'd like to begin by thanking Elder Shane Point for his good words and his medicine. We are gathered here today virtually in support of Chief Roseanne Casimir and the Secwepemc Nation. Singing and drumming is our medicine. We raise our voices, we raise our drums today to help sing those 215 precious children home. With that, I am grateful now the words of our old ones, our elders, survivors, their truth will be heard. Their tough way will be heard. Intergenerational survivors, community, and nations. This is Canada's reckoning. I send out prayers to all and hope that as we lift and sing together, that we can be together as not so much as Shane has shared. With that, we'll pass it over to District Vice Principal David DeLong.
Tanse, hello. My name is David DeLorme. I am the District Vice Principal of Indigenous Education for the Vancouver School Board. I am Métis Cree, originally from the Treaty 6 territory in Saskatchewan. I would first like to begin by acknowledging the 250 children found at the Kamloops Residential School. Sadly, this is not an exception or an isolated incident. There can be no hiding from this fact. It is absolutely critical to acknowledge this truth. Residential schools were a reality, a tragedy that existed in our country, and we have to own up to that. To the families and the community of Kamloops Secwepemc First Nation and to all the survivors, I stand with you. These children will not be forgotten. As educators, we must work to share their stories while honoring the memories of everyone impacted by the residential school system. My thoughts and prayers are with you all. Merci. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Davida Morrison. I'm a missionary here in Queen Dakota. On my mom's side, on my dad's side, I'm Scottish, Irish, English. I'm originally from Mississauga Scuba Island First Nations in Ontario. I live presently on the Tsleil-Waututh Reserve. My traditional name is Binu Wabi, which means to see like a golden eagle. I'd like to introduce Chief Dan George song that we'll be singing, gifted to us by the George family. heartbeat of the Mother Earth, of each other, the nation, and the universe. It breaks down stereotypes and racism. It aids in healing intergenerational trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. It promotes student and community connections. It revitalizes Indigenous language, music, culture, and practice. It's excellent for connection and suicide prevention, addictions prevention. It's experiential learning, oral learning, ancestral connections. It's fun, it's safe, it's inspiring and inclusive. It includes all peoples, elders, adults, children. It alleviates public school stress. It regulates your heartbeat, your physical and your cognitive abilities. It stimulates and enhances memory, and it balances your emotions. Next, I'd like to introduce our superintendent, Suzanne Hoffman.
I assume this is a technical difficulties issue here, but I'm sure she'll be back in a minute.
Should we? Yeah, that'd be good. Can you turn that around just 2 seconds? People are gonna think I was behind. Thank you and welcome back, and I'm actually quite grateful for the need for a battery swap because it enabled me after the beautiful songs and the words of shame just to reground and center myself. As introduced, I'm Suzanne and I'm the superintendent of schools, and I humbly stand before you today as an ally for and a supporter of Indigenous people, not only across Vancouver School District, but beyond. The discovery of a mass unmarked grave and the remains of 215 children at the former Indian residential school in Kamloops is a sad legacy of the horrific tragedy of residential schools across Canada. Our hearts and deepest condolences go out to the Kamloops Disquetan people, Indigenous families, students, staff, and Indian residential school survivors as they grieve all across Turtle Island. It is important at this time that we take the time to pause and to reflect, and to think about our role in understanding the truth
of our history and also our efforts towards reconciliation. To our Indigenous families, students, staff, we acknowledge that the effects of colonization play out in your lives each and every day. We apologize for that, but we are incredibly grateful that you are here and that you are part of this work alongside each and every one of us. And we commit, as a school district, to the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. For those of us that are not Indigenous, I think it is very important that we take the time to learn. We need to listen deeply. We need to care, have empathy and compassion for those who have been most impacted by our history. And although we don't know everything right away, it's important that we make that commitment to learn. It is our responsibility as settlers on this land to be allies in the work as we go forward, to learn, to listen, to understand, and to help others in their journey of understanding our past. I do want to acknowledge the amazing work that has taken place in our district over the last 2 weeks. The work that has been done in an age-appropriate way to recognize what has happened. I am thankful for the conversations that have taken place in classrooms, by teachers and staff, with colleagues, with peers, in homes, and in our communities, as this work around truth and reconciliation moves forward. Today we came together in healing, and tomorrow we need to come together in action. I'm incredibly grateful for Elder Shane Point for being a part of this day, and I'd like to welcome Elder Mary Jane Joe to say a few words at this time. Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen and to be a part of our day.
I lift my hands in greeting to you. My name is Mary Jane Joe. I am Intlakatmach, Interior Salish, and I have the pleasure of living in Coast Salish territory. Intlakatmachkin, Injawa Niketko, that is my ancestral name. I spent 12 years at Kamloops Residential School. We had no choice in the matter. My mother spent 3 years at Kamloops. Her memories are being whipped and beaten for speaking one word, one sentence in her language. My 6 siblings attended Kamloops. They were traumatized. I was traumatized. It was a brick building. It was like being an inmate in an institution, an asylum. We had no rights. We had no freedoms. We were regulated, regimented, converted, all in cruelty. When I left there, my grandmother, my parents, became medicine for me. They taught me what I had missed out on at the school. I received a drum when I graduated, but no drumstick. And I want to share how I got this drumstick. My grandmother made this for me. She went out to the willow bush. She chose a branch, but before she cut it down, she gave thanks to the Creator for giving us the willow branches. And then she put an offering on the ground to say thank you, because we don't take anything from the land without putting something back. And then she was free to cut this branch off and to make me a drumstick, which I treasure to this day. I treasure the drum because it was illegal, banned from our lives. In the past, the drum is our voice. When we can't pray, sing, the drum can become our voice to the Creator. And that's the teaching of the late Mabel Joe in the Lower Nicola Band near Merritt, BC, where my family lived. The 4 drum beats represent honoring our ancestors. So today I want to honor our ancestors and the findings at Kamloops. The drum beat represents changing the atmosphere within a room, within an area. The vibration brings positive energy. I want to sing a healing song that I learned in 1992 when one of the churches here in Vancouver began the process of acknowledging their wrongdoing, the Anglican Church, St. Mary's of Kerrisdale. In that gathering, Ojibwe minister Father John Haskell from Minnesota sang an Ojibwe crane song, a healing song. And in my culture, the rattle represents a healing and reconciliation. And Father John gave us permission to sing that song. And I love that song, and I sing it as often as possible. The crane song represents a prayer bird. Thank you for the positive efforts you are doing in this era of reconciliation. We can all do our part. The opportunity is there today. In my language, I say zo zo efji iatlo, and that means be strong, of good courage, and stay well. Haichka, thank you.
Okay, so I think that's it. But we're just about out of time. So maybe we can sort of recap that tomorrow, but I'll let you pack it up. And yeah, tomorrow we'll talk about genocide. Okay, so that's it. See you tomorrow, people, okay?